All right, we're talking about America BC. In the last program, I pointed out to you that there are more than 3,000 sites here in the United States of America that we have discovered, that we have found monuments, writings, coins, Egyptian hieroglyphics, Irish Ogham writing, Phoenician coins, Roman pottery, Norse burial mounds, and they've been found in numerous states. Not something that you found, say, in New York State or up in Massachusetts, but they've been found all over the United States. From New Mexico to West Virginia, from New Hampshire and Vermont to Georgia, Michigan, southern Canada, all over Central and South America, Brazil. In fact, Brazil, the word Brazil is a Hebrew word that means iron land. King Solomon had trading ships bringing iron ore into Elath in southern Israel. They found a blast furnace down there, the remnants, an ancient remnant of an oxygen-fired blast furnace, something that we didn't discover until nearly the 20th century here in the United States. Now, this ancient technology that we are discovering, I'm going to give you a couple of more examples. For instance, off of Bimini, there is a city under 60 feet of water, streets fully laid out, stone buildings built. It should be pretty obvious that whoever built that city and whenever it was built, it wasn't built when there was 60 feet of water there. It had to have been built at a time when that water wasn't there, which means that the ocean level had to be down 60 feet or that portion of the crust sank 60 feet. Well, it could be one or the others, but I just wanted to point out, here's this ancient city here in the Americas, 60 feet underwater. Down in Peru, there is a number of peculiar sights. Monkeys and spiders and other animals. I mean, when you're down here on the ground looking at these piles of rock, that when you get up in the air with an airplane, you can look down on it and see that it's a monkey, it's a spider, but you can't see it from the ground. Who built that and why? Who did it and when, and what was the purpose? There are walls. One wall down in Peru has a stone in it. 50 tons is the estimated weight. It's an irregular stone. It isn't square. It isn't rectangular. It's an odd-shaped stone. It's just like a rock coming out of the river. And then with that rock, all the rocks around it are cut to fit it. That technology is not available in the world today, and as I speak in the year 2007, we cannot duplicate that wall today. We don't have the technology for it. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt, is plus or minus a half an inch on its four corners. We couldn't measure it until 1964 with laser transit to determine how square it was. We knew it was built pretty accurately. I mean, we measured it with tape measures. But a tape measure over 14 acres isn't that accurate. So, with a laser transit, though, you can. And then we found out their expansion joints. Who came up with the idea that heat expands stone and that cold contracts it, and that you would need expansion joints in a monument or in a building that large, and without it the stones would crack? Well, whoever built it knew it, and whoever built it had at least the technology of a laser transit of 1964. And there's one more here I wanted to point out to you. It's called metal workers. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 22, there is a report here of a story. Listen to this. It says, Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Now, here's Genesis 4, shortly after the Garden of Eden. And these people are artificers in brass and iron. Now, when you went to school, did you hear about the Iron Age, the Copper Age, the Stone Age? Did you hear about that? And did you hear about billions and billions of years? That's what I heard when I went to school. Did you hear about Columbus discovering America? And did you hear anything about those 7 or 8 pyramids out in Illinois? Did you hear about 3,000 archaeological sites in the United States with Egyptian hieroglyphics in them? Or with Irish Ogham, Roman pottery, Norse burial mounds? Did you hear about any of that? You know, our government and our public institutions, and when I say public institutions, I mean our corporations like General Motors, public institutions like our universities and colleges, you know, the public institutions like our libraries, they lie to us a lot. Yes, our government and public institutions, they lie to us continually and constantly. They lie about economics. They lie about politics. They lie about war. How many lies have we been told over the past 4 years about the Iraq war? And that's by our president. Now, our congressmen and our senators, they stand up in the halls of our public institutions and reiterate the lies of our president that we now know are lies, and we know that they are lies because now we know that the president knew, and those senators and representatives knew or should have known that what they were doing at the time they did it was, in fact, wrong and a damn lie. I say damn lie because that's the way Mark Twain put it. He said there are lies, then there are damn lies, and then there's statistics. And then that takes us to the realm of science. They lie about economics, politics, war, the budget, diet, food, science, evolution, and they lie about archaeology. And that's the subject matter of this week's program. This takes us to a book called America BC. A guy that wrote it is a Harvard professor, like Immanuel Velikovsky. He's a contrary guy. Well, they call those guys an iconoclast. A guy who stands up and says, "Yeah, I heard about Columbus, but it's BS. It's BS." And most of you people know what BS is. Besides Bachelor of Science, it's BS. And in the early 1970s, a group of us, this is Barry Fell speaking now in the epilogue, written in 1989. Now, he wrote this in 1989, nearly 20 years ago. He said, in the early 1970s, a group of us who were interested in ancient scripts used to meet occasionally at Harvard University to discuss the decipherment of what we believed to be ancient inscriptions. Out of these beginnings came the Epigraphic Society, formally inaugurated in 1974. And once our publications began to appear, the membership grew until now there are a dozen chapters in the United States and overseas. In this epilogue, some of the more interesting results of the Society's work are here presented. So I'm going to pause right here and make my little mark in the margin. I like to read a book by first starting off with the table of contents, and then I go to the last chapter. In this case, it's the epilogue, so that I can get the answer. So we'll start with the answer to the riddle. How's that? And in the epilogue, he starts off by saying, in this epilogue, some of the more interesting results of the Society's work are presented, because this book, is about 300 pages. It's 300 and some odd pages, 350 pages. Well documented and footnoted. Furthermore, they've got the photographs and plates in here of the original sites, where they took the pictures before they scraped off the lichens and the moss. That's to confound the skeptics who say that, well, it was a fake, that they made it themselves in the laboratory, took it out into the woods, and then said, look what we found. No, these are monuments that are humongous in sight that weigh 30 tons. I saw one that Gloria Farley found over near Heavenly, Oklahoma, where she lived. And it's a huge rock. Hell, that thing must weigh 25, 30, 40 tons. It's all that a 10-wheel dump truck could haul, maybe even an 18-wheeler. And it's got this Ogham writing on it, and it's down in a little gully. And it's a state park. The state of Oklahoma is a state park. I never heard anything about it. I never read anything about that in any archaeological publications here in the United States. There is a wall of silence about these stories, about these archaeological finds of America BC, and there's a logical reason behind it. So let me share it with you. A lot of times people ask me questions like, why would the government do that? See, they can't believe it, number one, and so they come back in defense of the government because of their ignorance. See, all of us feel real bad when we find out we've been deceived, lied to. And so we have this belief system, and then when somebody challenges it, like Barry Fell, or somebody comes along and challenges FDR, but why would he do that? See? Well, there's a motivation behind it. The president lies to us about the war in Iraq for population or people control. That's the purpose behind it. They're in a program to create a one-world government like we had around the Tower of Babel. And the normal people of the world, the most of the people, the majority of the people, they don't want that. And so a minority of people have to enter into a conspiracy together to bring it to pass. The average American didn't want to go to war in 1938, so Franklin Roosevelt had to engineer foreign policy and the processes that work around us in international geopolitics to get the Japanese to attack us. Then we could stand up in righteous indignation and say, look what those nips did, and now we have to go to war. And the Japanese were actually responding to a 1937 policy in which the United States, along with Holland and a couple other countries in Europe, placed an embargo upon oil being exported from Indonesia to Japan. What would you think if a group of countries, let's say Russia, China, and Iran, got together and formed an embargo against the import of Middle East oil to the United States? I can assure you that war would be inevitable and probably tomorrow morning. Certainly within 90 days. It's just an inevitable result. So when I heard about that, and of course I didn't hear about that in public school, I got that from the underground press. And when I saw that, I said, well, I'm not surprised that the Japanese attacked the Americans at Pearl Harbor. I'm amazed that they waited 5 years. What took so long? It was an act of war when President Roosevelt did it in 1937. Why would they wait 5 years? Now, when we get over here to this epilogue in America, BC, the question arises, why would the archaeological world, the scientific world, want to hide these Egyptian hieroglyphics found in West Virginia? They want to hide them because it doesn't fit with the political agenda. It doesn't fit with the scientific agenda. It doesn't fit with evolution. Evolution is what we've been taught in this country. The Bible has been ridiculed and impugned and taken out of our public schools because it's unscientific. Okay. Boys and girls, just what in the hell is scientific about hiding Egyptian hieroglyphics, Irish Ogham writing, and Phoenician coins found in burial sites in at least 9 states in America? Boys and girls, there isn't anything scientific about it. It is the antithesis of science. And that's just the god-awful bald truth of the matter. They're liars, frauds, and charlatans. Nothing more and nothing less. Now, occasionally, we get a little glimpse of reality from an insider. Now, this guy, Barry Fell, is one of the insiders. See, he's an archaeologist. He's a college professor. He's from Harvard. Harvard, as they say up in the Massachusetts area. Harvard. And so, he's somebody that's got some credentials. Now, he went about this, very, very slow and very, very cautiously. Having seen what happened to Emanuel Velikovsky, he didn't want to lose his job, and so, he kind of tiptoes around the tulips and tiptoes around the edges over here. He published this book back in 1976. Today, it is common knowledge. What he has reported in his book, America, BC, is common knowledge. It's not accepted because it's not politically correct. You carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and longshoremen are not going to hear this anyplace else. You're not going to get it in your public schools, and your children are not going to hear this in their public schools. They're going to hear about laying the neighbor girl in the back seat of their Chevy or something, but they're not going to hear about America, BC, because that would lead you to the Bible and Scripture. Now, I read to you this scripture a little earlier here about Genesis chapter 4, that they were artificers in brass and iron. Think about this for a second. When Columbus discovered America, they were casting cannon in sand. There were no turret lathes. There were no artificers in brass and iron in Columbus's time. They were not metal workers. They could cast cannon in sand. They could make spears, spear tips, and swords. But they could not make engines. They were not metallurgists. Now, here we have reported in ancient times, right after the Garden of Eden, artificers in brass and iron. Now just take a look at the history of the world from Columbus to today. We went from casting cannon in sand to being able to make sheet steel to make ships, iron ships that float in the water. We learned how to make rivets and bore holes in steel. We learned how to make steel from iron. We have learned in 500 years how to make plates of steel by adding other elements to make them harder. We've learned how to make aluminum, and we've learned how to make brass from copper. We've learned how to use other base metals and make mixtures of metals in order to become artificers in brass and iron. We now have turret lathes and metalworking machines, and we can make automobiles and engines and airplanes, and we have a technology that can take us to the moon. Or so they tell us. Well, boys and girls, if we can do that in 500 years, I want to remind you that from the Garden of Eden to the flood was 1,656 years. That's 3 times longer